Good evening and welcome to Taking the Initiative. I'm Reverend Bill Kuntze, your host for these weekly conversations with leaders in public service, leaders in nonprofits, with people who are delivering health care to all of us. I hope that you will join us every week, and in between, check out our website at www.takingtheinitiative.com. There you can find links to communicate with us. We would love to hear from you, and I will surely read any messages and feedback you send to us. And you can find the archives of our shows for the last 3 or 4 years. Just go down the list for that year, pick out what interests you or programs you may have missed, and watch them at your own computing device at the time of your choosing. Certainly, there is no organization that has been more connected to my work here at Taking the Initiative than the Lehigh Conference of Churches. That's partially because they do so many things that are so important in the Lehigh Valley region. I'll be talking with the executive director of the Lehigh Conference of Churches about some of the exciting things they're doing that could be done in your area too if you live elsewhere. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Dr. Jack Felch is the executive director of the Lehigh Conference of Churches. Before assuming this position some 3 years ago, Jack had 2 previous careers, most recently as a church administrator in a large congregation, and previous to that in the United States Army. I'll be interested to hear how you morph from one to the other, Jack. He serves also on the Coopersburg Borough Council, where he and his wife live, and as a volunteer moderator for the Lehigh Presbytery. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you, Bill. Nice to be with you.
I want to start out. You have a foot in government, in the public sector, local government. You have a foot in church leadership, and you have a position as an executive in a faith-based nonprofit organization. I'm just sort of wondering how that all works for you in your vocation and in your calling.
It's a kind of a complicated question, and
You're
trying
a complicated life.
Well, trying to tie together all those things. Service comes to mind.
Yes.
My first career as an Army officer was serving my country. It was not a job, it was a commitment to service. And in the borough, there was a vacancy and a need that was having trouble being filled. And again, I felt called to volunteer to serve. That was 9 years ago. But
still there.
I am continuing to serve there on the council. I think there is a time to get new people into the process, and we are working to do that. We have several new council people who will carry on long after I'm no longer serving there. And then church service is something I have done throughout my life, whether it's the local congregation or the higher levels of the church. I have found that meaningful. My new pastor, Jack Haberer, wrote a book called God Views. And there are several different ways people look at God. Some consider it missional, that I need to be out and doing work. Some are very devotional and contemplative. And others see it as a structure, an organization, the church, ecclesial.
Yes.
And I think I'm very much an ecclesiast. I think highly of church structure and church governance. I think that's part of being one church. regardless of denomination. And I was invited to serve at the Conference of Churches because of administrative and organizational background. But it so fits my view of ecumenical, let go of our differences and work on what we have in common. And so I do see my work at the Conference of Churches as a calling to service. So that might be the one word that would tie the three things together.
It sounds like for you, your current position really draws these strands of your life together for
it does.
For you. And well, that's interesting to hear a little about your journey. The Lehigh Conference of Churches is, at least in my experience, it's not typical of what is often expected or seen in a council of churches or a conference of churches. They're often focused on, community religious celebrations at important times, educational things, maybe how various pastors provide chaplaincy in an institution like a hospital or something. And you do all that by all means, but the Lehigh Conference of Churches is something much more than that. I wonder if you could sort of give an overview of the Lehigh Conference of Churches and how it got to be the way it is.
Well, we are I think we're going into our 63rd year. The conference was formed in 1954. And I follow several executive directors who did excellent work as the organization matured and met needs and grew in support from churches. It started, I understand, with only 6 pastors who said, gee, we could do more if we worked together than any one of us could do separately. We now have some 140 churches who have chosen to associate with the conference. We find that association crosses all denominational lines of the Christian faith. We have Orthodox churches involved with us, we have Roman Catholic churches involved with us, mainline Protestant churches, and many independent churches who are part of that organization, who support the social work that we do in the city. It's bringing together those churches who are motivated by their faith to help people. And the helping the least among us is really the challenge that we face in all of the work that we do, by whatever means that we carry that out. So the ecumenical work, ecumenical is a word that it means Christian unity. And so the idea of bringing Christian churches together to do this work is a very important part of the organizational structure. I can't say that without mentioning our Jewish and Muslim partners who work hand in hand with us in serving in soup kitchens and serving in drop-in centers for folks with mental health challenges. We couldn't do the work we do without the whole community involved, but we wish to maintain our identity as a Christian organization. It is very different. I understand we're somewhat unique in that nationwide. But there's certainly pastoral calling for pastors, as you know, Bill, can be difficult and challenging. And there are reasons that pastors need to get together for self-support. That is not the function of the Conference of Churches. We bring communities together, congregations, pastors, members, and other faiths in order to help many of the people in our community who are struggling with basic human needs.
And actually, it's not so long ago, probably half a year ago or so, that we had Reverend Larry Pickens on here on Taking the Initiative, an old colleague and a friend of mine from Chicago who is now the ecumenical director of the conference. And we did explore those what I don't know, in my terminology, more traditional aspects of what a conference or council of churches does that he so excellently leads the community in doing. So people are interested in that. I just look back in the archives that I mentioned about 6 months ago and see about that fine work. What I'd like to focus on this evening is then this other thing, the human services that you provide or you coordinate and make happen. Just what's the overall, I wonder if you want to, what's the scope of the services that the Lehigh Conference of Churches provides to the needy in this region?
Hunger, health, and housing tend to be a way of explaining the kinds of things we do. Now, those occur in a variety of different ways, and it's important to drill down in those. But we meet people where they have a need. We meet people on the street, under the bridge, and these folks have a variety of needs, whether it's connecting them with medical services, connecting them with housing, connecting them with a location to get a hot meal. So meeting people where they have a need is one way to look at the breadth of the work we do.
Hunger, health
and housing.
And housing. So why those areas of work for the Conference of Churches?
Well, as a Christian organization, we go to a scriptural verse in Matthew 25. I think it's verses 36 to 40 for any of your viewers who might want to go look that up.
They should.
You may recall that at one point Jesus said, "When was it that I was naked and you clothed me, hungry and you fed me?" So it is that passage that we often go to that says this is what compels us across all denominational lines to care for the least of those in our community. We work in partner with many other organizations, so the conference could not do it alone. Without other agencies to carry part of the load, do part of the task of caring in our community, our challenges would be overwhelming. So we're one of many.
Let's drill down just a little, at least on two of those now before the break. Hunger.
Hunger we address through a soup kitchen program that runs 3 days a week. It's a come on in, no questions asked, anybody is welcome. And we tend to feed a couple hundred people a day. We do 3 days a week. Our friends at Catholic Charities do the other 4 days a week at a different location, both within the city of Allentown.
An excellent partnership.
Yes, yes. And again, by splitting it up, it's not too much on either one. Another way we address hunger is through a program we call Daybreak. Daybreak is a drop-in center for folks with mental health challenges, and it does require membership. They have to have a diagnosis. And those folks are provided 3 meals a day. Mostly that helps them maintain their own living housing situation because their small resources can go to paying their rent, and we help them by reducing the cost of their food. It also becomes a family for folks who might otherwise be quite lonely in their lives.
I remember that well. Just a minute on health.
Health is mostly in the mental health arena. The Daybreak Center requires mental health assistance. Overlapping with housing, there is a program called Clearinghouse that we operate in both Lehigh and Northampton County that requires a mental health diagnosis for serious and persistent mental health problems. And housing assistance is available for those folks. And so health kind of crosses all spectrums. We don't run medical clinics.
Yeah.
We're not physical health, it's more mental health that we encounter.
And don't you do financial management for folks who also have mental disabilities?
The financial management is a program called Representative Payee.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have a mental health challenge, but they have some inability to handle their own finances, and either a doctor or a judge has directed them to have a representative payee who manages their bills and payments so that they can stay within a budget.
We need to take a break. After the break, a little more on housing, please. And then I want to get to some of the new exciting things that you're doing to better serve people, so stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm Reverend Bill Kuntze, your host, and I am talking to Dr. Jack Felch, the Executive Director of the Lehigh Conference of Churches. Just want to pick up, if you would, and give an overview of housing services that the conference is involved in.
Affordable housing is a significant challenge in our community, particularly with the growing development in all of our cities, but Bethlehem has been through a lot of it, but it is still a growing community. And certainly Allentown, with the NIS development, it's a very significant part of our growth. But that affects the affordable housing that's available to folks who have limited resources. So these are the clients who come to our doors. Our programs are generally funded by government resources. We have several contracts with the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and that provides for the staff to meet with people and the subsidized rent for people who qualify under certain economic conditions. And then the program I mentioned in the first part of Clearinghouse provides housing assistance